Welcome to Baby in the House, the podcast where we tackle all those tough parenting questions where everyone's got an opinion, from grandparents to neighbors to that nosy lady behind you at the line in the grocery store.
Where we examine the research, share our experiences, and those of the families we care for. We give you the clarity and confidence you need to make the right choices for your baby and family.
Without guilt, confusion, or analysis paralysis. Well, let's shift gears and talk about screen time. I get asked about screen time all the time. And I'm not just talking like adolescents that are spending too much time on TikTok, going all the way down to newborn babies. And is it okay if I play on my phone while I'm breastfeeding? And there's so much guilt, confusion, unclarity, lack of guidelines or changing guidelines. It feels very difficult. And then you throw them into school and they have Chromebooks. And it's like, well, we had put these restrictions into place, but they're on their Chromebooks most of the day, or their iPads at school, and they have homework assignments. So how should we go about thinking about screen time for our kids?
Oh man, it's such a constant question I get. And the research keeps changing and technology keeps changing. So it's really something, and there are some really great people writing about this right now. And a lot of great research out there. Let's start with, let's really think about this, Bill, as our children's screen time, our baby's screen time, and then we have to talk about adult screen time. So let's that, because that's really key. Okay, so the American Academy of Pediatrics and the World Health Organization agrees that children under 2 should completely avoid media. They do have an exception that they give us. They say, occasional video chats with family members.
Sure.
There's a reason to do it, right? That can be okay. And so some people say, yes, this is a really good recommendation. Children should learn by play and through, face-to-face interactions. And then other people are like, yeah, that's a great recommendation, but it's completely not practical. Like that is impossible. Our world is full of this. So those are sort of the competing things. Now, despite this recommendation that children under 2 have no screen time, 68% of kids younger than 2 use screen media on a typical day on an average of over 2 hours a day. So that's a lot.
That is a lot. So that's like, great idea, but guys, we're not going to really follow those rules. So how can we help parents that are not the no screens, nothing at home, versus those that have kind of the TV on all day long, that sort of thing? I think there's probably some good middle ground where we can come to and say, this is fine for kids, versus if you're not doing this, shame on you.
Right, exactly.
Unplug your TVs.
There's a lot of context to think about. I mean, one of those things is that 68% that are looking at over 2 hours a day, that's direct exposure. And you just mentioned something that's actually called secondhand screen exposure.
Right.
So that's when the TV is on in the background, throughout the day. These days I have the news on a lot, and so the news is often just on in the background. So it's like secondhand screen exposure. And then you have to think about siblings. Like when my firstborn was under 2, we had the TV on, Sesame Street might be on for 20 minutes here and there, we would have it on. But by the time I had my third kid, who had, when he was 1, his brothers were 4 and 7, and the TV was on more, or the screens were out more. So, you can't, if you have more than one, it's really, to follow that recommendation rigidly, I think is pretty unrealistic. But is this a problem? First, let's ask that question. Like, is it a problem for kids to have screen exposure? And the research says, yeah, it kind of is. First of all, there's no evidence that children under 1 can really learn anything from a screen.
Right.
So, people are like, oh, but it's enriching content. Well, they're not really learning that way. The way that they learn language and ideas and concepts and all of those things have to be with a live caregiver. In fact, one study tried to teach, let's see, how old were these kids? I'm looking at my note and I don't see how old they were, but they were infants. So they actually showed people on screens, showing them an object and naming it, like, cup. And they didn't learn. But as soon as a live person was like, cup, they got it instantly.
Then they got it.
Yeah, they just don't have the memory or attentional skills or symbolic understanding to get it from a 2D image. So the other thing we have to think about, Phil, is it's not just what they're being exposed to. It's not just like that they're looking at, something adorable, on TV that's bad for them. It's a lot about what they're missing out on during that time. So if for 2 hours they're looking at a screen where they're not really learning, they're being entertained, but they may not really be learning. And of course, older kids can learn from screens, but we're talking about babies. Then we have to think about what the deficit is happening, what they're missing out on by not getting that instructive live time. Right. So they're not being read to or playing or laughing or making messes that they're learning from and things like that.
So you're taking them from their 3D world where they can pick stuff up and hold stuff and hear from mom or dad, oh, don't do that, or isn't that nice, or look at that red flower, whatever it is. And you're putting them in front of a screen where then they're getting this, different experience that's 2D. They don't learn from it, but it does attract their attention because it's entertaining. And aren't we all guilty of zoning out on our screens from time to time? Can't say that there's a lot of great learning that happens when I'm zoned out on my screen, scrolling and those sorts of things. So I can only imagine that the same experience happens for kids too. So if in the context of babies, it sounds like let's try and keep them away from screens and definitely not rely upon the screens to give them some learning experience or justify screen time by putting on some educational content and then expecting that that's better than just giving them some simple manipulative toys to play with on the ground and illustrating your day as you get things done around the house.
That's right. And we can think about this in terms of sort of how the brain gets built, right? So, I always think about physical development as being sort of top down. Like first they hold up their little neck, and they can hold up their torsos, then their arms, then their little hands, then they get the Cheerio grasp, they start crawling, they stand, they walk, they run. So physical development, I think of as top down, but the brain develops really from the bottom up back to front. Right. And so when I think about like a bottom up experience, like the first way that infants learn is very much from sensory input. So taste, smell, touch, hear, sound, all of our senses, that's really where they're learning. And so that's really flat when we're talking about a screen. The other thing we have to think about, and I really want to defer to your expertise here because I read the research, but this is your life's work, is the negative health outcomes that are correlated, not causal. The research has not shown cause yet, but correlational health outcomes for screen time in very young children. The research says sleep disturbances, cognitive deficits, obesity, and weight issues even later in childhood, language issues, social and emotional delays, again, not causal, but that there's maybe this indirect detrimental effect. And the studies are also not distinguishing between types of screens and how stimulating the content is. So it's not, great research that we can draw conclusions from. But what do you see, or what do you talk about when we're talking about health outcomes to a lot of screen exposure?
I talk with parents a lot about this because it's such a pressing issue and ubiquitous thing that we really have to be careful about the time that we spend on media, not just because of the brain development and perhaps the issues that you described, as things that are going to happen because they're being on screens, but all of the ancillary stuff around screen use, which means we're not getting outside, we're not exercising, we're being sedentary, we're sitting when we could be up and moving. Those are all things that affect babies because they'll just plop down on the ground and stare up at Sesame Street when they could be using their hands and developing their motor skills or being curious or trying all those other things. It takes away that curiosity. And then as they get older too, then they're conditioned to plop down on the couch and watch the show and plop down on the couch and watch the show. There's just not a lot of context where you can watch a show if you're not just sitting still, not doing anything else. So certainly the issue with obesity comes into place because we're not burning calories, we're not moving, we're just sitting there and being stationary. It takes away that drive to learn and know because you just allow the screen to feed you the information that you get rather than looking up in a book or even Googling it or asking Siri or Alexa. It's just, what information am I going to be provided by this show? We're going to sit still and just allow that to, be what we're exposed to. The sleep is a huge issue. When I've been talking to a lot of teens as we're in summer right now about sleep issues and hearing from teens that they're having trouble falling asleep. And I usually don't even ask them what time they go to bed because I don't care as much about what time they go to bed, because in the summer teens sleep in, stay up late and sleep in, and that's fine. Might as well. I did that too. But I ask what they did the 90 minutes before bed, and universally it's play video games or text my friends or scroll TikTok. And those things, that exposure to both the light and the stimulation, make it very difficult to fall asleep. And every kid that I've talked to lately has had trouble falling asleep. And when we work our way back, 60 to 90 minutes, it's those screens that are causing that issue with falling asleep. For one, it's really stimulating. You're getting the dopamine rush, the adrenaline rush from the video games, from TikToks, and from likes on Instagram pictures, and all those things. Those are dopamine rushes. Those engage your system and are stimulating. And then the light too, and you get that blue light exposure that tells your brain, hey, our brains were around for a couple million years before electricity, meaning that when it got dark out, our brain said, okay, it's time to go to sleep. Like, I shouldn't be out hunting and gathering at night because I can't see very well. So at night I'm tired. But we're taking away that by having this ambient light and this blue light that we're constantly being exposed to. And that makes it then difficult for your brain to release the hormones, melatonin and others, that make you sleepy and make you fall asleep. So if you hop into bed and you're on Instagram and on TikTok and on the news and whatever, then it's really hard to just turn everything off and say, brain, go to sleep. It's 2 a.m. I got to go to sleep. You need that time to prepare for sleep. So working our way back now to talking about babies, exact same things. If they're around screens into the evening time or after dinner, if that's part of your evening routine, then it might make it difficult for them as well. Because if you're slightly stimulated or interested in Sesame Street, then think about how much that baby is taking all of that in. And it's really overwhelming to our senses. And it makes it hard to just calm down and say, okay, Sesame Street's over, time for bed. Go to sleep, baby. Well, they're not ready for that either. And they need that time where their brain senses that it's getting dark, it's getting quiet, things are calming down. We're reading stories, we're having our wind down routine, and then we're able to go to bed. So, it spans the entire spectrum. Adults too, guilty at times of being on my screen at bedtime, and it makes it take a little bit longer to fall asleep because you have that glow of light telling your brain it's still daylight, you should be up. And I'm getting exposed to all those things that then I'm thinking about reading the news or seeing things online or social media stuff that then makes it difficult to just turn all that off and go to sleep without having some residual brain dust thoughts about those things before you nod off.
Totally. And I can easily go down the rabbit hole. If I'm just scrolling, I'm like, oh, that's a really cute sundress. Like, I should order some sundresses. And then the next thing I know it, I'm like, my brain's like doing fashion design and I can't sleep.
And the comments too, you get wrapped up in the comments and you read through and you see that negative comment on something that you posted or something somebody else is talking about. And you think about those and
life work then, right? Like you just
right. Oh my gosh. And I think that is a good segue into what you were bringing up at the beginning of this discussion of screen time, is parents modeling screen time for their children. I am guilty, and I try and do the best I can of every time my kid looks up, I'm not like this. But sometimes I struggle with that. And I know that when my kids see me on screens, then it's what they're going to do too. And so I try and model good screen time practices so that they see me not looking at my screen all the time and not responding to every notification that I get, because I know that if they get the impression that, well, dad's phone just went off and he got up from the table to go see that text message or sports update score or instant direct message, whatever it is, then that shows them what's important is being available all the time, being connected all the time, responding to text messages and notifications all the time. And then when our kids get those things, they are tuned to that's what's important and that's what's expected. And even those sacred moments like family dinner can be interrupted by somebody liking your picture or commenting on your Instagram post or, posting a new TikTok video or something that is totally not urgent, let alone important most of the time. And so I do talk with parents a lot about whatever you want changed for your kids' screen time, start with yourself and make choices and be intentional about the way that you let screens enter into your life.
It's so important. You know, there are studies that show that even if no one's looking at a phone, if there is a phone on the dinner table during dinner time, that the conversation goes less deep and it's shorter. So
Totally.
I think they impact our lives, whether we're directly interfacing with them or they're just in the background. And, you know, these screen issues will be issues we will all deal with throughout our child's entire childhood.
Right.
But I think what I want to say, I have so many things I want to say about this. The first is about a really interesting interaction I had. I was at a book talk with my co-author, Dan Siegel. We had just given a talk on one of our new books. I can't remember which one it was. And a woman waited in line to have us sign the books. And she said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure, of course." And she said, "I'm worried that my child is addicted to her screen." Now I get that question all the time, right? And I said, "Well, how old is your daughter?" And she said, 18 months. Now I had never had anyone say that before. And I said, "Oh, tell me more about that." And she said, "Well, when I take it away from her, she just screams and yells. So I don't really know what to do." And I said, "Well, if she picked up a knife, would you take it away? Like, you would take it away from her? She might scream and yell, but you know it's not safe for her. So
Right.
I just want to empower you, Mom, to be willing to set limits, even if it makes your child unhappy. And it's okay that she gets upset, and you just say, 'I know you really wanted that, didn't you?'
Right.
And then, you know, you comfort her, but that doesn't mean you change the limit." But then she said, "I'm worried that I'm on my phone too much." And I said, "Yes, all of us tend to be on our devices too much." And then I said, "Here, let me ask you a question." And I don't know how this came to me, but I think it's a good one. I said, so this was a primary caregiver. She was a stay-at-home mom, and so she was the child's primary caregiver, which is an important piece of this. And I said, if you hired a nanny to take care of your daughter, and she or he was on their phone as much as you are while they were watching your daughter, how would you feel about that? And she said, "I would fire her." She
Wow.
said, and it kind of hit her. She was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm on my phone all day long." Now, listen, we've got to be practical. Like, I remember I was a stay-at-home with all three of mine until they went to kindergarten. And I taught some parenting classes and, you know, got a PhD during that time and stuff too. So I don't mean to say that, you know, I wasn't doing other things either. But I have pictures of me at the zoo, like my husband's holding my kid to like go see the elephant, and I'm reading journal articles on the curb. So like I wasn't all the time. But really, you know, I think that when we think about being primary caregivers, that really that is our job, is to really, the care of our children is everything. But I remember being with my kid all day, engaged in play and enrichment and messes and being tuned in and really just being with him through the whole day. And then my husband would come home and I was so tired, and I craved adult conversation, and we were making a decision about refinancing the house or something. We needed to talk. And so we went out to dinner, and we had a little iPad or something, and our son was probably 2, and we put on like a Magic School Bus episode for him, 20 minutes. And we got so many dirty looks because we had our kid on a screen. Right. While we were, you know, like we were just like, oh, distraction or whatever. But they didn't know the context. They didn't know that I'm with him, you know, that I was with him constantly. And that what was important for our family in that moment was for my husband and I to have time to connect. And so
Sure.
We shouldn't judge each other. You know, I'm certainly not above, you know, having opinions and feelings about people giving their 1-year-old a phone for their birthday. Sure. Like I certainly, might feel some judgment there, but we just all have to remember we don't know that context in the background. But when we are on our devices, we really, even though I think I can multitask, the research says none of us are really that great at it.
Right.
But imagine this. Imagine you have your kid your baby in a stroller, and you're walking down the street. Your baby is facing away from you, so you're not even having eye contact, and you're not on your phone. And a big truck goes by, and you say, "Wow, did you see that big truck? The wheels were so big. And what noise did that truck make?" Right? And you're really joining with them in the moment with your attention as to what is happening in the world. And they're getting all that rich language and attunement and all of that. Versus if I'm pushing the stroller, baby's facing away from me, same thing. And I'm scrolling Instagram, while I'm pushing the stroller, and I don't say anything about the truck. And we can't be engaged every second, but Right. It's really important that we are present. And, you know, my kids are older now, but when my kids walk in the room and I'm working on something, I really try to either say, hang on, I'm in the middle of something, I'll be with you in a sec. So I don't have to just stop everything for them. Or
Right.
if I can, I literally close my computer, I set my phone down, and I make eye contact, because that tells them you're more important than my device. So I just think we have to be really thoughtful about how we are not just modeling, but how it can really get in the way of us fully being present, at least some of the time.
I think that I like everything that you said there, and I'll unpack a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Starting with what you just said, which was show your kids that they matter and that their attention matters. And that doesn't mean you just can't have the phone out at all when you are present with your child. And what that means is you make those intentional choices of, you're not like half distracted. Yep. And they're showing you the picture that they drew, or they're, you know, the baby's crawling around on the floor doing something. You can move from this task to the child and then move back again to that task. And that's a much better way to do it than to just constantly allow that distraction to be a part of the conversation. Instead, focus on the person that's in front of you, on your priority at the moment, and then shift back to your other priority, because we do have to get stuff done, and you don't have to be on all the time. And you don't have to feel guilt about having those moments to take a break and scroll Instagram or whatever it is that, you know, gives you a little mental break from all of the rigors and stress of life. I would try and choose things that actually do help you to take a break and don't just amplify the worry and stress and uncertainty that's present in the world and online in particular.
Don't like Google
constantly.
like diseases my baby can get. Like, don't
right,
do that.
Exactly. I'm going to take a break and look up what this rash could be. So I think that's really important. And I think that you can challenge yourself to say, okay, at dinner time, phones are going in a different room. Watches are going off, because I will tell you, and I struggle to admit this, but I leave my watch on at the dinner table. And sometimes it doesn't ding, but I can feel the vibration. And then, you know, I'm getting a drink and I'm shifting my wrist so that I can see what that notification is.
Yeah.
You know, it's very sly in my world, but I'm sure my kids see it, and I'm sure my wife sees it too. And so watches, notifications are off at the dinner table so that we can just have a moment to connect as a family and say, hey guys, and you should illustrate this for your kids, because then they will know it's important. Hey guys, at dinner time, everybody puts their screens away. We put our screens in a different room, and this is a big deal so that we can connect. You don't have to do it silently. You can draw attention to it so your kids realize and see that modeling of this is important. And I like what you said too, that example that you gave on the flip side about taking your child out to eat and giving them the iPad. And I feel like that was a thing that would have been the case when your child was young. And nowadays, I feel like the opposite would be true. If you took your child out to dinner and they were screaming, or they were doing developmentally appropriate things like not wanting to sit still and wanting to throw spaghetti on the floor, people would be telling you to give that kid an iPad and get them to be quiet so that we can all enjoy our dinner. And I think that things have flip-flopped, and that we need to pull back a little bit on being willing to eliminate all of those opportunities to keep the kids quiet. That now I think has permeated society, and is just the expectation that the kids are going to be quiet, or what's the deal with this 2-year-old? They're out of control. Well, they're just a 2-year-old. Like, going out to dinner is something special, but it's kind of overwhelming, and it's kind of a lot to ask.
That's actually one of the biggest concerns I have about what I've seen in terms of how screens are used with very young children.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that when the child is experiencing a negative or difficult emotion and they're crying or yelling or fussing, that a parent might just shove a screen in their face to stop the crying and to stop the, you know, and I think, you know, as a mental health professional, you know, one of the things that we've seen is that our society has pathologized anytime people have negative emotions. Like, people should feel sad. People should feel anxious. People should feel mad. Those are the range of healthy human emotions. And so whenever our children are upset about something, if we move to distraction as almost like an immediate, you know, gut reaction, we're not giving them the practice to actually be resilient and to learn to sit in difficult feelings, to then learn that, yes, sometimes we feel disappointed, and it doesn't feel very good to feel disappointed, but then you start feeling better. And gosh, you know how to feel disappointed and move through it. So really the way our kids become resilient is by practicing dealing with difficult things with our support. And so if we constantly distract them when they have a feeling or an emotion, they're not getting that practice of expanding, and this is Dan Siegel's term, their window of tolerance. They're getting practice expanding as development unfolds, tolerating difficult things like not getting what you want. If you immediately get distracted with something, you're not really practicing dealing with not getting what you want. And so we want them to have these experiences, and so much better if your child is doing that, to say, oh, you're really sad, or you're really angry. I'm right here with you. I'm sure I will help you, but let's not distract them. I mean, certainly there are times to do that, right? If you're at the pediatrician's office and you're at a well visit with your older kid, and you have 5 minutes with that doctor and you need questions to ask, and your 2-year-old, that might be a great time to use it as a distraction. So we want to be practical, but just overall, it's important that we think about this and do what you were just saying, which is set our own limits. We lots of times talk about setting screen limits on our kids, but just setting our own limits, like not having it at dinner or those kinds of things.
I think, one thing that you said there, and you do a really good job with analogies or metaphors or whatever they are. I don't think they're similes, but I'm not sure if they're analogies or metaphors. But the idea of like eating one's feelings, and we're in the middle of coronavirus right now, and I know that a lot of people are indulging in more snacks than usual to help cope. And we know that that's not a good thing in the long term. Like, we shouldn't have chocolate cake every night because we're sad about coronavirus. But it's probably okay to have it from time to time, and to make it a special thing, and to be like, yeah, this kind of sucks, so how about some chocolate cake, and that will be a little bit better. Treat screen time in a similar fashion. It's okay to sometimes say, okay, I really have to talk. Here is my phone. You can have it for 5 minutes. Let me log you in because you don't know the password, sort of thing, rather than, oh, you're upset. Here, just hold this. And turn a show on and watch Disney Plus. There's a big difference between that versus the, hey, you're screaming and crying, here's a sucker. Here, you're screaming and crying, here's a sucker. You're not going to do that, but you're giving them this digital sucker whenever they're upset. That's not the right answer too. And there's certainly a good middle ground. What I have done, which I recommend highly, and I don't know if anybody that I recommend it to actually does, is you have this beautiful phone that has very fantastic screen time settings, and we turn them on for our kids, and we limit their apps and those sorts of things, but to do it as a parent. And I will challenge everybody listening to this to get your phone out and turn your screen time settings on so that you get an hour of social media per day, and start with that one thing. And when that goes up, then you're done with social media for the day. And what you will find is that you fill the time with other stuff, like reading a book or talking to your spouse. Once you've exhausted an hour, and who actually in the world needs an hour of social media per day? But it's going to be a huge drop for most people to say, I only get 1 hour of social media per day. And when that little thing warns me that there's 5 minutes left, then I better enjoy it and better get my most important social media stuff in. And once it goes off, then I'm done with social media for the day, and I'll just have to wait till tomorrow to see what the comments were. Like, nothing's bad that's going to happen. There's not an Instagram emergency that is going to be, that I'm going to face if I can't get that, but it will allow you to move on to do other things and feel less guilt about, I just scrolled for hours and hours and hours, and where did that time go? It's an external way to do that. And the real challenge is not to unlock yourself, to just give yourself more time once the time runs out. And the way that I would combat that is, my wife has set my screen time password. I don't know how to give myself more time on social media without saying, hey, can you unlock my phone? Which I sometimes do if I, have an Instagram emergency or something like that, or just want to have a little bit of time to scroll through Facebook. And same for her. Like, she likes to scroll Instagram when she brushes her teeth at bedtime. And every night, her screen time is already up for the day. So before she brushes her teeth, she hands me her phone and I unlock it for her. And having kind of that accountability makes it less likely for you to just all the time be unlocking it and getting back on screen. So that's one thing that we've done at our house that has really given us more time to connect and just have that silence or that quiet, or allow yourself to think your thoughts rather than constantly allowing for distraction to get into your day. And if you teach that to your kids, then they'll adopt that mindset too of like, we can have social media time, but then we can have time where we're not on social media and we're not even having the opportunity to be exposed to it.
That's such a great practical tip. And I think that, we do have this thing called the default brain network that really is the part of our brain that is really active when we're doing nothing. And it's really important for creativity, for curiosity, for mental health, all those things. So, I think other practical things besides setting those kinds of limits for ourselves are, one of the things that I love is that, and this was a suggestion, I don't remember who I heard it from, but it wasn't my idea, and I wish I could give credit. But the idea is that anytime you pull your phone out when you're with your kids and your primary caregiver in that moment, you're taking care of them, is to explain why you're using it, to have them engage in it as a relational thing. So you say, hey, I need to check the map because I'm not sure where we're going. Or, hey, I need to call dad because I'm not sure if he needs 5 oranges or 10 oranges from the store or whatever.
Right.
Or, so just really you're engaging with them relationally, and you're having a rationale and a reason for doing it. I think too, setting limits as kids get older about where the telephone or where the devices can be and where they can't be. Like in my family, when we're riding and when we're on a road trip, full freedom around number of hours that they can use it. But when we're
watch some shows, read some books.
Exactly. When we're driving around town, no one has their device out. And you look out the window, you can sing, you can talk, you can do nothing, but no. And gosh, this is like a medical thing, but fecal matter is on like an absurd, it's like 80% of phones have some sort of fecal matter on them. Take their phones into the bathroom. And so, I remember like as a kid, we didn't have devices. So when I would go to the bathroom, I would like look at the seams of the wallpaper, or,
you would read the conditioner bottle or the toothpaste. I know all the ingredients in toothpaste because way back then you didn't have your Instagram to be scrolling while you're going to the bathroom.
Yeah. So, I think just setting limits on where the phone can be, where it can't be a dinner table, can't be in the, out in the car. And, even my kids have friends, and when we're not in a global pandemic, we have other kids in the car. And I just say, hey, no, we don't have phones out, in the car. So you guys put your devices away. Or sometimes if it's just if it's a 5-minute thing and I don't want to be that mom that day and I'm just sort of somewhere else, then I don't. But my kids don't get their phones out. So then other kids, it kind of happens more naturally because then they talk to the other kids and the kids talk to them or whatever. But and then, I do think there's value. Like my kids are super into music. So a lot of the time when we're in the car, they're like wanting to put on a playlist or whatever. That's different. That's like working the radio, I think. So, but yeah, I think the other thing is just being really practical. We've got, when your kid is homesick or you have some big deadline or we're in a global pandemic or whatever, just have a kind of set family sort of plan and around what typical limits are like. And then know you may need to relax them. I certainly know that there were times as a parent when my kids were little that I was just at my end, right? And I felt like 20 minutes of Magic School Bus on the television was going to be far less damaging than the way I was going to talk to them or interact with them in that moment without a break. So just thinking about your kids' best interest, be practical during global pandemic. I mean, I think it's fine to have a lot of wiggle room and be a little bit less, strict around screen time. Just, I think having your basic plan and know that you may make exceptions to the plan is a good way to go.
And communicate that, like, guys, this isn't typical, but we're kind of stuck at home. And so we're going to watch one extra show per day because everybody needs a little bit of a break and it's been kind of stressful. And sometimes just having a little quiet is nice. So we can watch one extra show per day. Like you can tell your kids, like, I'm more stressed than usual. Or I love what you were saying about like, I need to get my phone out because I got to look up the map or how many oranges that we need, or being honest and saying, guys, you guys are all kind of driving me crazy right now. And I would really like 5 minutes to not talk with you and return some text messages. So I'm going to get my phone out and you're going to leave me alone. Like,
yeah, totally.
It's better to just do that than just to like tune out and then just be like on your phone and ignoring them. Just be honest and say, you guys are driving me a little bit crazy. I would like to spend 5 minutes on Instagram. Please entertain yourselves.
I need a break. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I remember times. One of my kids, and most everyone has at least one kid like this, who, when they tell stories, they recount every detail. Like if they want to tell me about a show they saw or a book they read, they recount every single detail, like where you feel like your ears are going to, like you're just like, your brain is so tired. And so I remember times like, mommy's ears need a break. Mommy's ears are so tired. So I would hit the record button on my, like, the audio recording on my phone. I'm like, tell the whole thing into mom's phone, and I'll listen to parts of it. Like, like sometimes I would use it like that and make it.
I love that idea. Asynchronous connection.
Exactly. And then here's the other thing too, is if you have an infant, and you have older kids who are watching TV or whatever, that's a great time to get a little bit of a break. But I do think that screen time, passive screen time, is also really different than if you're sitting with your kid.
Sure.
And let's say you're watching like a nature show or something, and you're with them, and you're like, wow, those dolphins swim so fast. Look at them go. Do you see them jump? And you're kind of interacting with them around what's happening on the screen. I think that's a definite bump up in what's happening. I think it's less detrimental, more beneficial.
Definitely, there's different types of media. We could spend another hour talking about a media diet that is made up of, some just mindless Paw Patrol, some connecting while you're watching it, or playing a game where you're involving your senses and learning color. I mean, there's a lot of screen time is not just one thing. There's a lot of different things on screen time and ways that you can do screen time as a family where you can connect. Like, we watch this show called Somebody Feed Phil that's on Netflix, and it's a guy that travels around and tries foods and experiences culture, and we look forward to that as a family and are like, wouldn't it be fun to go there? That's very different than, guys, watch Home Alone for the 18th time this month.
I know my family growing up, we always looked for, we had like Disney would put on a movie, like on Friday nights or whatever. And then Sunday nights was the Muppets. And it was a big deal. Like, a whole family would sit and watch the Muppets and stuff. And so I think TV and screens can be really nice in terms of a family ritual and connecting around something like that. Or, when we fly on planes, and I have like a Scrabble thing or a word-based thing, I could lean over and have my kid do it with me, So there are ways to use it better than others. But the bottom line is really, screens are going to be part of our children's entire childhood, and our entire parenting journey. They are not going away. There are lots of good uses, but we really do need to be aware that too much of it is not good for our kids or for us. And so setting limits that make sense for your family, making exceptions as needed, and then watching our own use and setting our own limits. Those are all really important.
I think that is the perfect bottom line for all of what the long conversation that we've had about screen times is. Be intentional about it and make choices that improve your connection as a parent and don't make you feel guilty all the time. Because there's plenty of other things that you could be. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, be present when you can, but no, you can't be present every second. It would be intrusive if you stared into your child's eyes all day long and tried to stimulate them with education. That would be too much. So just take, be consistent as needed and flexible as needed around those limits.
Amen. Well, I think that is a great bottom line and another great episode of Baby in the House, and excited for our next episode where we'll talk more issues facing parents relating to their babies. Until then, keep up the good work.